Okay, now we're going to introduce more of our panelists, and we want to begin with Jenny Morrow. Looks like Jenny has just joined us. Um, Jenny Morrow is a therapist in Salt Lake City, and I don't think we've had our Mormon Stories podcast yet, which is a shame. We need to fix that, Jenny Morrow. But Jenny does run a cool. She's not only a therapist, so if you need a therapist in the Salt Lake area, or a coach or whatever, Jenny can tell you her website. But she also runs a cool podcast called Ask an Ex-Mormon Therapist. So we're going to give that a shout out. But Jenny, why don't you introduce yourself just a tiny bit to our audience?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited. And can you guys hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, my name is Jenny Marrow, and this is my first time on Mormon Stories. I'm actually feeling really excited to be here and connect with everyone. So I am currently a therapist and relationship coach, and I'm trying to remember some of the other things that you guys wanted us to share. I am
Tell us about
resigned
your.
from the
Oh, keep going. Keep going.
Okay. I'm resigned from the LDS Church. I am currently partnered up with a lovely boyfriend who we're actually in the process of moving in together before February 1st. So we've got that going on. And so navigating my own relationship in life and working with other people and working on religious transition work with a lot of clients, which I love. And the podcast, I started the Ask an Ex-Mormon Therapist podcast about a year ago, and just as a chance for people to write in questions and letters. And so I get on maybe once a month or so, answer a question or two. And it's not a super regular project right now, but I do love answering questions. So feel free to check it out on iTunes or at www.askanexmormontherapist.com. And if people do have, questions, feel free to reach out to me. I think you can contact me through there or through my website at www.advancedrelationships.org or jennymorrowhealing.com. So a few options.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Well, Jenny, we're so glad you joined us today. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming
Thanks,
on.
I'm excited.
All right. Our next guest is someone who's been making a lot of news in the past, I don't know, 6 to 12 to 18 months. He's perhaps best known on the Ex-Mormon Reddit, which is an amazing support group for, let's just say, questioning, transitioning, and post-Mormons. But this gentleman is named Ryan McKnight. He lives in Las Vegas. And on Ex-Mormon Reddit, he's known as Fearless Fixer. And I know him because when that really gnarly November 2015 policy came down from the LDS Church, it was Ryan, I think, who first broke that news on Ex-Mormon Reddit and shared it with me, which allowed me to share it with a lot of people. But he's gone on to form MormonLeaks, I think, an amazing new project to share, sort of to encourage transparency within the church. But Ryan McKnight, tell us a bit about yourself and welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Well, yeah, MormonLeaks, I guess that's what people know me for publicly. I live in Las Vegas. I was born in the church. I left the church coming up on, let's see, 3.5 years ago, I believe. I guess my resignation was about April of 2014. And then I stopped going to church in the fall of 2013. So I haven't been out of the church that long, but like you mentioned, I had a small role in the November policy leak that kind of associated my name with leaking, and that kind of led to people contacting me, which led to me seeing a need for a website, which led to, I suppose, where we're at today.
What made you want to come on Mormon Transitions, Ryan?
Well, Shandy contacted me, asked if I would like to help contribute to the conversation. I guess we're going to be talking about relationships between the Orthodox members and ex-Mormons, I believe is the topic, which is something that interests me. I've actually talked about that on some other podcasts. I think it's an interesting subject to explore. And especially in light of what I'm doing, I think that the knee-jerk reaction from the Orthodox Mormon is to see what I'm doing and see it as sort of the work of the devil or some sort of apostate thing, and immediately have sort of a turnoff. And I would kind of like to dispel some of that myth, and I think help talk about how something like MormonLeaks does not have to be seen as negative towards the church.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Ryan. We're glad to have you on, and a shout out to all our buddies at the Ex-Mormon Reddit.
Yeah.
All right. Royleane Otteson, we're really excited to have you. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on Mormon Transitions. I'm excited. My name is Royleane Otteson. I'm married to Steve Otteson, and we live in the Seattle area. We've been here since 1998. I currently am still attending my ward occasionally. With my husband, we go to other different faiths and other churches as well. We're kind of enjoying a beautiful interfaith journey. And I still hold a calling. I'm on the Compassionate Service Board in my ward, and specifically outreaching, doing community service projects in my ward. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that. And I'm just starting. I was telling Steve Holbrook that my kids are teens, and I graduated with a degree in special ed from BYU, and I'm just starting a job as a behavior technician, so working with kids with autism. And I'm also keep myself busy. I'm the president of the African Promise Foundation, on the board, the president of the board. And so I work with Susie Benson Gillies, who's the founder of that, who was recently interviewed on Unthoughtful Faith about her work with that. And we raise money for children's education in Uganda.
We love Susie.
She's awesome.
Tell her hi for us.
I will.
All right. Well, how do you feel about holding down the believer attending wing of the panel?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try. My faith is, I can understand both sides, so I'm happy to do that.
That's great. All right. Well, it's glad to have you here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Royleane. All right. Our last guest is none other than a dear friend, Steve Holbrook. As Steve's unmuting his microphone, I will just say that Steve is the leader of the Utah Valley Post-Mormon community, which is this amazing 2,000 person support group for transitioning and post-Mormons in Utah Valley. But Steve and his wife, Chris, are dear friends. Steve, tell us a bit about yourself. Steve, we can't hear you. So for some reason, your microphone isn't quite connected. Are you on mute? You're not on mute. So try and figure out your microphone. And as soon as you come on, give us a verbal cue and we'll come back to you. All right. All right. So we're super excited to begin today's discussion. And there are a lot of questions. We have no questions yet from our listening audience. So listening audience, get going with the questions, but that's okay because a lot of people have sent us questions. So to begin, we are going to begin with a question that's asked by Jason. Just as a segue, if you guys remember last week, we did a pretty in-depth, maybe hour and a half discussion on tips and tricks for speaking with believing family and friends. And so that was so good, but we didn't have time to really take questions and answers. So here we go. First question is from Jason, and Jason writes, do you avoid the subject and act like everything is great, or talk about it? That is a great question. So just to put it in context, imagine that you're really, really struggling and you're kind of scared about whether to come out or not. Or let's just say that you have come out, but like many Mormon families do, they just don't want to talk about it. So what I'm going to do is ask my panel, whenever somebody has an answer they're ready to give, to unmute their microphone, and I'll be able to see them and know that they're ready to give a response. Having said that, Margi, why don't you take the first question? Let's just say that you're out to your family as a non-believer, but you've never really talked about it. Let's say that the tension is as thick as butter. What do? Do you just avoid talking about it, or do you address it?
Well, this is difficult. I would probably say, so there's tension around it. So for me, I would probably gauge the quality of the relationships, and again, maybe my intention in sharing, and what type of setting it is. Is it a birthday party? Is it I think all those things kind of will come into play as to, but I don't love the idea of the act like everything's great as like one part versus talking about it. And I do feel like there's some middle ground there, but that assessing, I think, is super important. Where you are, what's the setting, what are the quality of the relationships with that you have in that setting, and what's your intention in really talking about it at that point?
What's your intention? So those are some of the things we talked about last week.
That's what I would consider before
very
sort of
good.
Engaging.
Royleane, you're unmuted. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think Margi's points are really good to what's the intention and the setting. But I think there definitely comes a point when their intention is there that it starts to ruin or starts to take a toll on the relationship. And that conversation needs to be had. And I think if both parties can, like, especially when you first come out to them, at least this is the case in our family when my husband first came out to his family, it was very hard, right? It's pulling the rug out from underneath them. It's devastating, and I understand it was hard for me to hear when he first told me, but you have to have that conversation with them for the relationship to continue to be strong. So at some point when the dust settles, I think it's really good to sit down and be really respectful and use respectful language to one another, not point the finger at them, how can you still stay in, as they're saying to you, how can you leave? That's not productive. So just for us trying to explain to my husband's trying to explain to his family kind of about faith journeys and stuff like that, and just respecting each other's journeys was really, he and his dad had a fabulous conversation, and they're in a much, much better place now. But it took a 3-hour conversation late at night for them to come to a good place again.
Got it. So it sounds like you're saying that for a relationship to stay strong and to mature, you can't just hide and avoid stuff. You got to kind of get into it.
Totally.
Right. And
just do it respectfully.
Yes. And I talked this with my therapist as well. Like we talk about if you're not willing to have that conversation with them, then you start disconnecting because the tension is uncomfortable. So you start disconnecting. And so it's like, is this relationship important to you? Because if it is, then you have to dive deep into the pain and heal it and have that conversation start healing and growing again.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Love
All right.
that.
Thanks, Royleane. All right, Steve, unmute for a second. Let's see if we can hear you now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Steve. All right, introduce yourself quickly, just super quickly,
Okay.
and then jump into the
really quick. But I wanted to comment on what the current conversation is as well.
Yeah, sure,
I think it's
sure.
really, really important. So I'm Steve Holbrook. I live in Orem, Utah. As John said, I think I was cutting out with my audio. I run a group, or I help run a group of about 2,000 PostMormons in Utah Valley, and we are growing. We're approving like 3 at least a day. And my forecast is this year, more and more people will be coming out of the church and needing a sense of, I'm not alone. And so I'm predicting that this year in particular, with the curriculum, that we'll be getting quite a few more people. So it's a delight to be here. A lot of people say, what? You live in Utah Valley? How can you say that? But I really feel it's a delight to be here. It's my home. So to the conversation, so I'm married, by the way, and we have 5 sons and 7 grandkids. I love them all. To the conversation about kind of using your own kind of awareness to tune in to if the conversation is impacting the relationship at hand. And I would add to that it may look like they're tuning out, it may be you. So you have to kind of check yourself to see if it's you who's putting in thoughts of like, oh my gosh, I can't be here anymore, this is driving me crazy or whatever. And instead of going there, go in a direction that fosters the relationship and put the brakes on if the relationship is impacted by whatever's being communicated. It's as simple as that. It's just being tuned in and being aware.
Beautiful. So just kind of stay connected and centered. All right, Ryan, you got your mic unmuted. You got something to add? And Jenny, you're next.
Yeah, I mean,
so get ready. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. That was all good. One thing I want to piggyback onto there is one of the biggest mistakes that I see ex-Mormons make, or especially people who are just beginning to go through what is often referred to as their faith crisis, is they get it built up in their head that they're going to be able to convince whoever it is they're going to talk to about this newfound paradigm that they've discovered. And I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but my view of it is that often ends up doing more harm than good. Because as we all know, it's very hard to convince somebody that the church is not true, for example, if we're going to use a sort of a generic phrase. And if we think
or to flip it, it's probably hard for a believer to convince someone who's lost their faith that the church is true. So it goes both ways. Just convincing doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
usually.
And I think most ex-Mormons would jump on that statement and say, yeah, so we also need to remember that it works both ways. Yeah. And if you're going to sit down and think that you're going to go through a bunch of bullet points and what you see as being sort of a logical construct of why we can't accept the truth claims of the church, it's probably going to increase whatever tension is there, or create tension where maybe it wasn't. And so I think that we need to be mindful of that approach, and we do need to talk about it, like everybody's saying, but we need to realize that talking about it is different from proselyting about it.
Totally.
Got it. Love it.
So important. I do feel like people can smell an agenda from miles away. There's something really different about a connecting conversation where the purpose is to connect and communicate in a very free way that's respectful, and one with an agenda where you're actually trying to push something. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and those of us who no longer necessarily believe in the church, we know what it's like to be felt like we're a project, right? So why would we ever want to turn someone else into a project?
To do the same thing, yeah.
One of the mottos I have is don't ever become the monster you're running from. And so that's really good thoughts, Ryan. Thank you.
Very.
Really quickly, Jenny, before we get to you, Bryce Thomas is saying that it takes too long to get to the subject matter, that our intros were too long. We want your feedback. We love it. So I'm not embarrassed to shout that on the rooftops. If listeners want to tell us whether they agree or disagree with Bryce, we'll take that feedback into consideration. We also had Marianne say that she appreciates the bios. So if listeners want to weigh in, we'd love to hear your feedback because we want to make this good. Also, just really quickly, Steve, before we jump to Jenny, Taryn asks, what is the curriculum this year? So you mentioned a curriculum. If you don't mind, unmute your mic and tell us what that curriculum is of which you speak.
Yeah, so as you know, the correlated Sunday lessons rotate through the scriptures, and this year they're studying the D&C, is my understanding, and it will mark the first time that auxiliary material has been made available, including the essays and some other kind of historical background kinds of pieces from largely the history department, is what I understand. And teachers are being asked to integrate the new information, the new findings, is kind of how it's being pitched from my perspective anyway. And so it's kind of optional. The first lesson's already taken place about the first vision this past Sunday, and there were various reports on the internet about how that went. There were a number of teachers who absolutely went into the new material, and those who didn't mention it at all. But this will be kind of the way it's going for this year. I think that a lot of believing members will encounter information for the first time. And the word will start to spread about that kind of online as people are dealing with this.
Got it. Okay. And Steve, is your prediction that the new curriculum is going to lead to more disaffection? Because my theory is that inoculation works, and that by people introducing in a gentle, elegant way the issues, people will encode them as no longer an issue and kind of keep moving right along. Do you have a prediction, or have you seen any anecdotal evidence either way?
Well, all I can say is when there have been any kind of disruptions in the church, like the November policy, there was an outflux or an influx from my perspective. And I think there will just be increased numbers. I agree with you that there's a certain percentage of the church for whom the inoculation strategy is meant and it will work. And I think it has to do with the amount of free will that one actually experiences in life. If you've given that over to the church, then you're likely to hear it exactly as they hear it. And so all this new information will be integrated as the new narrative, and you move forward. And you can still proselytize your friends, even with this new information, because it's just so wonderful. I think there are a set of people who are like that. And I think it's great. Good. They are so loyal, and I appreciate that loyalty. I respect that amount of loyalty.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to Taryn for that question. Please keep the questions coming. All right, Jenny, you've been patient. Tell us what you want to add to the conversation so far.
When I heard the question, I was thinking, it sounds like it's a question about, discussing any hard topic. So when a topic comes up that brings up a sort of intensity where there can be that fear, and I think for those of us who've left Mormonism, we get this experience of suddenly there's this really huge, intense topic that's just like there. And, this could happen in other areas of life as well, other than just religious perspective conversations. But I think the question is, when we feel this sort of intensity in a relational moment, do we talk about it? Do we share it, or do we just avoid the topic? So, because I think kind of like Ryan was saying, trying to convince each other and use facts and data is rarely helpful in relational emotional moments. And so I think the thought that popped up for me was, what most of us will do is we'll tend to follow our normal pattern around hard topics. So people who are used to avoiding things when it gets intense will often continue to avoid. And then those who try to use intense moments as a way to convince others to see what they're seeing will probably do that. So what I find is a lot of people end up following a certain pattern of communication that they've actually had for a really long time. So I think this is where it can actually be kind of cool to go through an experience like this, is you get a chance to see, what are my patterns when things get intense? What are my relational abilities in terms of communication? And if you find yourself constantly avoiding, then I would start with noticing that and starting to look at, do I feel like I have the skills for bringing up something hard? Do I feel like I have the skills within me for how to manage if someone doesn't understand what I'm saying, or do I feel like I have the skills for how to say what I'm experiencing? So if you're avoiding, it might be interesting to look at why, and if that's been kind of a common way you've dealt with intense, hard situations in the past. And then if you find yourself as one that's trying to proselytize or get in and explain why your way is the right way, it might be interesting to look at, is that one of my patterns? And then for some of us, it's a little bit of both. So that was my experience. I tend to, when things get hard, I tend to avoid, or I tend to get intense, but I'll like flip back and forth. So if the proselytizing's not working, then I'll avoid and withdraw. And so it was really interesting to notice how both of those are really two sides of one coin. They're both an avoidance of the deeper intimacy, the deeper connection that's available in that moment. And I think for most of us, we just haven't been taught those relational skills. And so what I would say for people as well is to know that there are so many resources. If you don't know how to talk about something, or if you try and it doesn't work, then know that there's a lot of resources out there for how to talk about hard and intense things in relationships. And even for me, so I've been doing therapy and coaching now for 10 years. And I've just started doing therapy in the last year with my own mom. not me doing therapy on her, the two of us going into a therapist together. Because one of the things I started to notice was when I tried to talk about things, I felt so afraid and so shaky inside that when it didn't go well, I would just withdraw again. And so for me, even though I have the skills and I could help other people, for me to show up that vulnerably and to show what I was really experiencing in these hard conversations was so scary that I felt like I wanted some outside support to help me do that. And so it's been a really, really cool and powerful experience for the two of us in being able to, and we've shared almost nothing about our beliefs on the church in terms of history and data and things like that. It's been so much more about our relationship and how the two of us communicate and just the patterns we've had over the years. And it's been awesome. So yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, super empowering.
Yeah, Jenny, what I love about what you're saying is, it's so easy for us to kind of think about this faith transition as just a disaster because our worldview changes, all the security that we had evaporates. Sometimes we lose friends and community. It's easy to just focus on the loss. But what I hear in all your comments, Jenny, number one, I heard you say that a faith transition is this wonderful opportunity to develop self-awareness and to do self-development. And it can actually improve your relationships, even with believers.
Yes.
I love that. It's beautiful. And the panel's nodding their heads, everyone but Ryan. Everybody else is nodding their heads. I love it. Thank you, Jenny. That was really good.
You're welcome.
A couple quick comments from our listeners. I think this is kind of interesting. Mitzi writes, Steve, going back to the curriculum, a lot of people are interested in this curriculum. Mitzi writes that she thinks that it'll be bishop's roulette with the curriculum because at least one bishop she knows refused to let their teacher teach the essays. So I think that's interesting. Steve writes, the new curriculum doesn't explicitly bring out the essays enough. For the essays to be mentioned in church, the teacher already knows about it and has to have dug in and then be willing to talk about it in class. That's not totally on topic, but I like to bring in and reinforce positively our listeners with their questions and their comments. Now, I'm going to go to a question by Matt. That's a question I really, really like. And I want to thank Shandy for moderating these questions. Matt wrote, how do we help our disbelieving siblings in hiding come out? So you have a sibling, you're transitioning or transitioned, you have a disbelieving sibling and you want to help them and they're in hiding, they're not out. The Matt wants to know how to help them come out. Now my alarm bell is ringing. Is your alarm bell ringing with that question, Margie?
A bit.
All right, Margie,
why don't you take it? No, you.
Okay,
you
okay. Well, I'll give this a first stab and then Margie or the panel can jump in. Matt, my first question to you is, why are you wanting to help your disbelieving sibling come out? Reflecting back to what Jenny just said, that's an opportunity for you to look inside and ask why you're uncomfortable with your sibling being in hiding. Is it because you feel insecure about your position? Is it because you feel alone? Is it because you're envious that you're taking all the heat and your sibling is sort of getting off scot-free? And all those are totally normal emotional reactions. But I would just say, does your sibling even want to come out? And is it your job to want your sibling to come out? Does your sibling have good reasons for not being out? And most importantly, Matt, I would want to ask you, if I were working with you, what self-development might we do such that you're feeling great no matter what your sibling does? Now, those are the questions that came up for me. I don't mean to psychoanalyze you. I don't mean to be insulting. If you want to ask a follow-up question or comment, I'd love to see it. But I also want to just ask, do you have a thought, Margie?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is this can be a very caring, a caring intention. that I see. So if I had a dear sister and I was out and I knew that she was struggling, and if our family culture perhaps was insensitive or a little bit more aligned in a way that didn't feel safe, to me, I could take it as a safety question, trying to allow for that sibling to feel safer, being, an advocate in conversations in a loving way for a different perspective. And I think this sort of introduction of differences in a loving way, that we can love people and be different from people, can be really healthy. So that type of advocacy for me, I can see an intention there. Let's just assume that, that's what the intention is sort of more of a safety intention. How do I help, my sibling feel safe? Those are some things that I would think about. I do think that it's a lovely thought. It's a lovely thought that you're looking out for. And in a culture that may feel unsafe, you can maybe bring in some differing points of opinion in gentle, really expansive, sensitive ways that add to your family culture and allow for people, depending, to maybe think about things in a different way, without an agenda, without sort of this, and that's really tricky, peeps. It really is a tricky thing, because I think it's so natural to want to be validated. It's so natural to want to, this idea of bringing your family with you. We come from a church culture where your family, it's all about the family together. And so we still, I think, sometimes bring that with us, that when we're on our way out, we want to bring everyone with us, as we go. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I'll invite any panelists that want to chime in to unmute. And while I'm doing that, Matt follows up with a clarification. He says that the sibling in hiding is not experiencing an authentic relationship with the believers in the family. And what I'll say to that, Matt, and I think that's really cool that you care about your sibling, in theory, if it's yours or if it's someone else's, and that, and by the way, talking about your sibling on Mormon Transitions is one way to help your sibling come out. I just thought I'd mention that. Sorry, I'm just kidding. Anyway, what I will just say in your response that your sibling is not having authentic relationships is to just remember something that I've learned as a therapist. I went and got a 6-year PhD. I've spent thousands of hours counseling people. And rule number 1 of being a therapist is I can't change anybody. Like I cannot change anybody. And I think I can be persuasive. I think I've been to a pretty good school. I've read a few books, and I can't change anybody. So, so rule number 1 as a therapist, and I see Jenny nodding her head, is that people have to figure it out for themselves. They just do. And it's so Mormon to want to change and fix people. But one of the great lessons that we can learn in this transition is it doesn't work. And that's their journey. So the work that we have to do is to be at peace with the fact that our sibling may not want authentic relationships right now. I'll just add, and Jenny, I want to bring you in, but I'll just add, Bryce says, personally, I would feel more validated if someone else in the family thought the same way I did. It would be really comforting. And that's absolutely legitimate and natural. Who wants to feel like they're the only one taking the heat? It's just not fun. And that can even build up resentment, because if you're taking the heat and you've got a non-believing sibling that isn't out, then you can develop resentment for them because they're not only not catching the heat, but they're not supporting you and letting you suffer. And that's totally natural. But again, that's your journey. So that's work for you to do. That's what I think. Jenny, disagree with me if you want.
No, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. The one thought I thought that could be helpful would be, if that is the case and that's what's going on, and that member of the family doesn't want to come out, they're not asking for help on how to do it, things like that. And in therapy school, one of the things that our professors would often remind us is, are you working harder than the client to get the outcome they want?
Yes.
Yes.
And so if you're working harder than someone else to try to get them this thing that you think they should have or they should want, then it's just helpful to check in with that. And then what you could do is practice vulnerability with that person. So if you're feeling anxiety about watching their lack of authenticity, or if you're starting to feel resentment that you're taking all the slack, it might be helpful to at some point kind of go inside and look at what that's about for you, and then to own up to it, in front of that other person, to let them know, I'm noticing I'm starting to feel some resentment about this, or it's hard for me to watch you have to hold back so much, and I give you permission to do that as long as you need to. Mm-hmm. And I want you to know I'm here for you if ever you feel ready to share more.
Love that. Now I'll ask you a question about that, Jenny. What if someone were to ask, well, why put that burden on them? Why not just let them, why tell them that you're feeling that resentment? That just makes them feel sad and awkward. That puts a lot of pressure on them. Some could say that's manipulative. What do you see as the benefit of bringing it up and then saying, but I give you permission? How can that actually lead to a positive outcome instead of just guilt and shame and pressure and manipulation?
So I think the benefit is that you're taking ownership for authenticity in your own relationships. And so, we never know how someone is going to experience our sharing, our unveiling of what we are and who we are. And so it is always a risk to share parts of ourselves in terms of just how other people will experience it. Now, if we are sharing it with an agenda, kind of like Margie said, I liked earlier when she said people can smell an agenda. And that's so true. If we're sharing it with the agenda of getting them to fix it so that we don't have to feel uncomfortable or resentful anymore, then they'll pick that up. I've been amazed at how much when we can really share things honestly without trying to coerce or change someone, but just to share what we're experiencing, it opens up a door for connection. And they may not take it in that moment, but basically you're mirroring to them what it is you're even wanting them to do. So I think that is really important, is that ultimately we're modeling the thing that it is we think we want everyone else to do. Because if we're thinking we want someone else to be more authentic, it's always, I believe it's always a mirror that's what we're wanting in our own life, right, is more authenticity. We just don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Isn't that, Margie, you tell me that a lot from Shefali Sayberry, that whenever we sort of don't like something about someone else, what that most often is a reflection of something we don't like about ourselves. Does that sound too pop psychology?
Well, I think it's worth being aware of. How about that? I think it's worth, it's worth asking oneself and starting there, for sure. And I do love the idea of, it's so natural in transition that it's such a self-involved, process. But I also love, and I mean, we can make it about other people, but it actually begins with us, that oftentimes our focus quite naturally is who we're talking to, our families, how they're not supportive, how we're, but in truth, it's really this excavation of ourselves. That's really what it is.
Love that, Jenny. Steve, I noticed you unmuted. I'll remind any panelists if they want to chime in to unmute. Loving the feedback so far. Rick, Gemma, Libby, and Seth have joined us. Welcome, guys. Steve, what do you want to add?
So I was just going to say that that kind of catching yourself in action and kind of what your intention is, what you're putting into it, kind of the way you perceive, has a huge impact. But I was just thinking to myself, if I were a believing member listening to this right now, this feels perfect to me. I love this because this is using a human brain to figure out how to communicate better with other humans. Is there anything more important than that? I mean, it speaks to me, but others would say, well, this is just a bunch of philosophies of men. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's great, Steve. So Royleane, since you're representing the believing active contingency, what are you thinking about what Steve said?
Hold us accountable.
Yeah. We're gonna need you. We're gonna need your help.
No, I think you guys are doing a great job. I really like how you pointed out that, once again, my therapist talks to me about this all the time. a people pleaser, and I also want to try and fix everybody's problems, right? We do that as also, so not only my personality, but also as Mormons do that. And I think that's kind of it doesn't, just because you don't believe anymore, that doesn't necessarily go away. And so I think that your advice is really good, that this sibling and his family is on their own journey as well. And I saw a great philosopher that said, the only constant in life is change. And on our faith journeys, we are constantly changing. So this person is having their own faith journey, and their sibling is having their own faith journey. But that does not mean that they are in exactly the same places. And that doesn't mean that they feel that they have to do exactly the same things about it. And so I think this person just needs to give their sibling space. They can be authentic with their sibling. But if this person is willing to put themselves out there and take the heat for it, that's the personality, and that's what they're doing. And they need to let go of resentment for their sibling for doing it a different way. And I mean, my husband and I talk about this all the time. I've gone through my own faith journey as well, along with him, and can agree with him on many different truth claims and stuff. But at the same time, our belief and faith is also very different. And I also choose to continue to be in my community, and just so we are choosing different things, even though there's some things we're the same, and our personalities are different in the way that we've handled it.
Love it. Royleane, I love this idea that we're all on a faith journey. Even if you're an Orthodox believing Mormon, you're still on a faith journey or a transition.
Yes.
And any of us who feel like we've moved on or transitioning, at one point we were earlier in the process, slowly figuring things out or trying to make things work. And so I love that idea of sort of like not putting everyone into a camp of either a true believing Mormon or transitioning, but realizing that we're all on a journey.
It's that building commonality, right?
And not a single one of us on this earth is having the exact same journey. We're all having a very different journey. And, we can have similarities, but none of us are having the exact same journey, especially not in any of these communities. My husband and I run a group here called the Eastside Pilgrim Society. And the reason we started it was to be able to have people to come together who are in mixed faith marriages, people who are still going to church, who are still believing, and people who don't believe, and people who are all the way out, to all get together and listen to one another's space and perspectives. And it's been really healing and helpful, I think, for everybody in the group to understand that we're all on our own journeys.
So what's this group called again?
It's called Eastside Pilgrim Society. And
it's a Mormon themed group.
Yes, and we're on Mormon Spectrum.
That's what I was about to ask.
Yes, we are on Mormon Spectrum.
All right.
And we get together just developing friendships and reading really great books. We just finished reading The Alchemist and Richard Rohr's Falling Upward, and we're having a great time getting to know one another and being real with one another. Beautiful.
All right, Steve gave you the thumbs up for being on Mormon Spectrum. That's mormonspectrum.org.
Thanks,
if you're looking for a community, check out mormonspectrum.org. All right, Christopher brought up a good point, and Ryan, feel free to unmute if you want to get in on any of this. Christopher wrote, and Royleane, this may start with you, but others can join in. Christopher wrote, so to define the term living authentically, is that living what you believe? So if a true believing Mormon or Orthodox Mormon says they truly believe, then are they living true to themselves as well? So if a true believing Mormon is sort of following the Orthodox line, hook, line, and sinker, can you say that they're living authentically? There's a little bit of a dig in that I'm reading, that basically you can't be a true believing Orthodox Mormon and be living authentically. Royleane, what would you say to that?
Well, I think of a true believing Mormon, I just think the important thing is all of us are living in our integrity. And he's saying, are you living in your authenticity? The only person who knows if you're living in your integrity or your authenticity is yourself. You're the only person who knows that. And I still believe in God. So I would say God, so God knows my heart, and I know what's inside me and in my heart, and I'm just doing the best I can. So yeah, if a true believing Mormon says they believe all of it, and they read the essays and they go through everything and they still believe all of that and they're living by that, then I respect that.
And isn't that the hardest thing? And it's so Mormon in a sense to say everybody should be seeing the world like I do. I remember as a missionary, knocking on doors saying, what is wrong with these people that they don't see the truth? And,
Yeah.
you know, like they must be sinning or evil or something, because anyone with a brain and who's tuned in to goodness would know that they should join this church. And don't we do that as transitioning Mormons? We look at everyone and say, the church is obviously not what it claims to be. And anyone who has a conscience, who's halfway intelligent with half a brain, is going to question it and probably leave it. And isn't that totally, completely insulting?
Yeah,
and
well,
Ryan, I see, Ryan, you've unmuted. So finish Royleane and then we're coming to Ryan.
no, I was just going to say, I had an experience in Sunday school class this last week where it was the first vision lesson. Nothing was brought up, no essays, nothing was brought up. It was reading the Joseph Smith history, going along with everything. And I had a difficult time in that lesson, but there were so many people around me who were crying, who were feeling the Spirit, who for their experience, they were really uplifted that day. And I, wanted to say a remark about the different versions or something, but I thought, okay, where is that coming from in my heart? Where is that coming from? Do I have an agenda? And so I waited to see if the teacher was going to bring it up, and she didn't. And we just went, and the lesson, for a lot of people was really, really touching. And so, when I watch that and I see that, their experience is that they are loving it and they are feeling the Spirit and is working for them. And that's what I say to people. It used to work for me. This part of it isn't working for me anymore. But this part works for a lot of people, and I respect that.
Beautiful. All right, Ryan, you've been silently wise. Share with us
Okay.
this wisdom we know is boiling in your
I don't know
brain.
if I have any major wisdom here, but I'll make a couple of quick observations and then share an actual personal experience of how I deal with this with somebody. But this conundrum that we have of how can I respect somebody that I think is totally wrong? I mean, this is like a real problem, and to me, it ends up being a two-way street. But it's really hard for us to divorce ourselves from thinking that somebody is completely wrong and then respecting their right to think that, or sort of like respecting their right to be wrong. And a lot of times, this is manifested in, we see Joseph Smith, he had teenage brides and he appears to have coerced them into these marriages. And then a believing Mormon, or a TBM as it's called, will either dismiss it or they will come up with a justification or something. And then the ex-Mormon will say, how could you justify such behavior? And without really sort of making much of an attempt to see the other side. And to me, it can end up being like an endless cycle, right? I would just say that in my personal life, I do have one particular friend. I basically, when I left the church, I lost all of my Mormon friends, basically. And just for those that wouldn't know, I was not a vocal ex-Mormon when I left the church. I didn't go around telling people that they shouldn't believe or announcing my lack of belief or anything like that. But for whatever reason, a lot of my friends, which I guess maybe they weren't actually my friends, so just kind of like cut off contact. But there is one particular friend who's probably my best friend. And we've maintained our friendship through this whole time, and our friendship has probably even grown stronger. And I don't know if he would fall into the category of, Orthodox TBM, but because I don't know if anybody would really fall into that category. But he's definitely more TBM than he's not. And I think the key to our relationship is that there is a mutual respect. And it is important to talk about the responsibility for ex-Mormons to respect the believers. Let's not forget that the believers need to also respect the ex-Mormon. And in the case of my friend and I, there's a true and real respect from me to him and from him to me. And there's certain issues, theological issues, even like political issues that we talk about that we're on completely opposite sides of. But never once, even though we may debate a point or even, I don't know if argue is the right word, but even come close, let's say, to an argument, it's never done in a way where the other one thinks that they're being disrespected. And, you know, as far as like, maybe we got lucky, the two of us, and, you know, we're a match made in heaven or something. I don't know. I don't know the trick to make that work, but I do strongly feel that it doesn't work unless it goes both ways. It just can't happen because we as much as we want to respect somebody, if they're not going to respect us back, it's almost impossible.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks, Ryan. I see, Royleane, you've unmuted. Just one quick second. Something that comes to me, if your friends and close people to you have to be like you for you to really like and value your relationship with them, that's not a real friendship. That's kind of narcissism. It's kind of just saying it's conditional love. I'll love you, but only if you're like me. And I only like you because you are a reflection of me. So the flip of that is, what's a real relationship? A real, genuine relationship is one where you guys are different, and that's awesome and beautiful, and you value the other's perspective, and you value hearing different perspectives, and you almost rejoice in the variety and the diversity of the points of view. That's actually the only real kind of relationship that I'm aware of.
I love that. It reminds me of the Oasis, part of the Oasis kind of breakdown of what is that people are more important than beliefs. And I just love that as a centering point, is just when we get into these sort of, I don't agree with your structure, or that in the end, the person always comes first, right? That's what's most important. So you can debate points, but I love what Ryan was saying. It doesn't touch the personal though. You're just talking about ideas, you know?
Love that. Royleane.
Just a strategy while Ryan was talking, I thought of something that has worked for me and my husband as well. You know, as Mormons, one of the main stories I grew up listening to was the first vision story, which to me, I got out of that was that Joseph Smith went to a grove of trees and talked to God. He had his own personal revelation, and you all can too. And so that actually, when I talk to my friends who are very believing, or like my husband as well, that's really helped, is that I am following my spirit. I'm following my intuition. I'm following the spirit inside. I am following what I believe is my personal revelation on this path. And so I feel like when you use those words and those terms, that speaks to them. They understand that, and they do respect that usually.
Love that. Thanks, Royleane. Okay. We have another question that's come in, and it's a really good one. And we've got this big list of questions people mailing in. But this one's so good, I have to add it. So Margi's saying, wait, what about the questions we prepared?
No, I'm gently pointing. It's different.
Will you forgive me? Okay. So first of all, Brett Nord joined us. I just want to give a shout out to Brett and Carmen, and my old friend from Microsoft, Linda Stevens, who's not Mormon as far as I know, joined us. So, hey, Linda. All right. So Heather asks a great question, and she reminds me of this really fabulous TV series I'm watching by an ex-Scientologist named Leah Remini. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but it's basically taking a deep look at Scientology. And every episode, she says the same thing, which is, if I can just help one person see the truth and escape from this organization that harms people, it'll be worth it. And that's sort of the same sentiment that Heather is asking. And so I'm going to throw this to the panel. Would it be wrong to enlighten in that moment? Wanting to spread truth is a good thing, isn't it? So what if, I'm going to rephrase for Heather, and Heather, you tell me if I've got this wrong. Gabe is saying yes. What's wrong with basically saying, I'm 99.9, if not 100% sure the church isn't what it claims to be. I know that my loved ones are paying a ton of money, giving a ton of time, and are under this complete misperception about what the church is. And if they really knew the truth, they would make a whole lot of different decisions in their lives And so what's wrong with trying to educate or enlighten them? Many of us who have left might have said, why didn't someone tell us? If we had known, we could have saved ourselves a lot of time and money and heartache. So with that same logic, what's wrong with having the desire to educate or even, quote, enlighten our loved ones? Steve, you go first, and then Ryan's next, and then Jenny and Royleane, you guys have something prepared. You too, Margie, just tap me when you're ready. Go ahead, and Steve.
So I'll try to keep it short. I think it's good to have that desire for them. If you really think it's going to be a match for them, rather than kind of force feeding it to them, open doors or nudge on doors with them. Ask certain questions, kind of like, well, how do you feel about that? That kind of thing. And then they'll walk down that path themselves. It's if you're pushing them, there will be resistance.
So don't push. You can nudge, you can hint, you can plant a little seed, but it's done with the spirit of, hey, listen, and we talked about this last week. Hey, listen, I've got some stuff to share with you that I think could really help you, but it's totally up to you. If you want it, that's great. If you don't, I'll never push you or try and force you. I would want you to do this for me, so I want to make that offer. But if you don't want to accept it, we're totally good. Is that kind of what you're saying, Steve? All right, Steve gives a thumbs up. Ryan, what do you want to add?
Yeah, well, I agree with what Steve said. And yeah, more than a proclamation, it needs to be more of just letting people be aware of things and having all of the information on the table, or at least as much information as we can have on the table. And I think this ties in nicely to, one of the criticisms that I receive working with MormonLeaks, and what our team, we are constantly accused of only wanting to try to tear the church down or convince people to leave the church. And I mean, I can understand why people would say that. And I can also understand why, as many times as I say, that's not our mission, why it will fall on deaf ears, because that's just not what most active Mormons want to believe, that's not our mission. But really what our mission is to do exactly what you guys are talking about, and that is just to simply get information out there that we believe that the public deserves to know. And then Mormons or prospective Mormons or whatever can make their own decision, whatever it is. We don't care. I don't care as to what their level of activity continues to be or whatever. And as an example, if you look at, the biggest leak that has gotten the most attention regarding this, the pay of general authorities and what they get paid or whatever. And everybody wants to know what I think about it, right? Well, my answer basically is, to me, I don't care what they get paid. It doesn't matter to me. The reason why we released those figures was not to hurt the church or to help the church. It was just simply because we believe that people should know that, so that they can put that in their list of things when they're considering whether or not to support the church. And there's no reason why somebody can't look at what the general authorities make and say, that seems perfectly fine to me. I'm going to continue to support the Mormon church. That's a perfectly acceptable conclusion.
Yep.
And if I had received those pay stubs and they had said $30,000 a year, I would have still released them, because the point is just knowing, putting the information out there, whether it be that or whether it be problems with the Book of Abraham or inconsistencies in the first vision, and then just letting people decide on their own.
Love it. Amy, I'm so glad you chimed in. Why don't you tell us what you've been thinking?
I really like this question from Heather, and it just is making me think that, we all want to tell each other what we believe and what we're thinking at the time, but you just need to make sure, kind of going back with some of the things that other people said, that it doesn't go back to it's all about you. And I think as long as you check yourself, that you're not trying to enlighten people or give too much information and make it, again, all about you, and making the other person believe what you want to believe. And I love how Margie said at the beginning to always validate that person wherever they are. I was in a mixed faith marriage for years, and it worked because we always validated each other where we were. And I think that that's just so important. And I felt kind of went in line with what Heather's question was. So just wanted to give that 2 bits.
Love that. Thanks for jumping in, Amy. Charles writes, and this sets off my nerves a little bit, not in a bad way. He says, you need to be shocked or jolted in just the right way to remove the, quote, Mormon goggles, unquote, and allow you to begin looking at things objectively. Does that, Jenny, you're smiling. Royleane, what's your response to Charles's comment?
So I'm assuming that was that kind of go along with the other question that we had?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. So these are the thoughts I had on this. So all of us, like I was talking before about our intuition, all of us kind of feel called to do different things with information and with how we're going. And once again, that we need to be true to ourselves and true to our authenticity and true to our integrity. So I was going to say to this listener, if they feel like that's what they need to do is to put information out there, then go ahead and put information out there. And so they're living true to themselves and what they feel like they need to do, just like Leah Remini is for Scientology. But Leah Remini can't control how many Scientologists will look at it and what they will do with it, just like this person can't control what people will do with it. So don't be disappointed. If you do it because you're living true to yourself, not because you're expecting anything from it.
Outcome, yeah.
And then also, I wanted to say that I kind of felt God kind of working on me through years, kind of helping me see things in a different way. But I was Relief Society president, and I had a good friend leave the church, and she offered to show me information. And I have apologized to her since then. I told her, no, I didn't want to see it, right? So here's a good friend of mine who is leaving the church, and I didn't want to see. I didn't want to look. And I was there for her, and I was loving to her, and we continued to serve her and hugged her and talked to her. But this person, I didn't want to know about Joseph Smith's polygamy. I didn't want to hear more information about that. Now, to my husband, when I talked to him about that story, he's like, that's crazy. If someone told me they had information, he'd want to know. But I was afraid. I didn't want to know. And so then a year later, when my husband came to me and said, hey, I have some information, like that kind of blew up, because this is my husband, my best friend, the love of my life. This other friend was a good friend as well. But my husband, I still didn't look for a few months. And then I watched your video, John, about all the things, are you doing, all these things to help support your loved ones? And I was doing every single thing except I hadn't looked and researched on my own. So I started researching on my own at that point, through sources that I felt okay with and trusted and stuff like that. But I had to choose to do it on my own. So just so this listener knows, don't expect anything out of it. People have to choose on their own to do it.
What's your response? And Jenny, I see that you're unmuted, so we're going to come right to you. But Royleane, Charles says that believers have Mormon goggles on that keep them from seeing things objectively. In a way, if I'm trying to be objective, that seems like a bit of an offensive comment. On the other hand, do you resonate with that as someone who used to be more Orthodox, but who decided at some point to read up? Did you have Mormon goggles on?
Well, I would say I had the Mormon goggles on that John has on now, through the goggles and the paradigm. He has on a goggles and a paradigm and a lens that he is seeing the world through. And I had on my lenses and goggles of the way I was seeing the world. So yes.
So that's the rub, is that Charles has goggles too.
Yes, we all do.
If Charles thinks he's not wearing goggles, then that's part of the problem.
Yes.
All right.
There's so much of this where I think it really does start with us.
Yeah.
It really does.
Jenny, let's get you in. What do you got?
Yeah, so when you were talking about the idea of Mormons need to be shocked, was that the word he used?
Yeah, yep. Shocked or jolted.
Jolted. That's
I don't mean to pick on you, Charles.
Yeah. No, and I mean, and I also, and I resonated with that in the sense that for me, it took seeing some things that kind of shocked or jolted me. And that was done, when I left Mormonism, I hadn't yet studied any of the history. And I was a very TBM, taught seminary kind of a Mormon, but watching gay and lesbian clients struggle and be suicidal behind closed doors over and over and over, and to start to say, wait a minute, something that I've been believing about this struggle is not correct. It can't be correct because it's just not lining up with what I'm seeing in my therapy room. And so that was kind of the shock or the jolt to me. And that's what created that desire for me to step back and take a break and then assess and get information. And then thankfully I found Mormon Stories where I could get information. And so I think, that's a reality, but and maybe not for everyone. It was my experience, and it may have been Charles' experience. But again, one of the things that I've found, is that there are moments where I feel tempted to try to shock or jolt someone else. So I remember having a family member tell me about a book she'd been reading about a politician, a past president, and his affairs. And she was just talking about how shocked she was. And I remember thinking, well, I ought to send you Lindsay Hanson's Park episodes on your polygamy. You'll be shocked, I'm thinking. And then I just checked in like, well, Jenny, what do you think you're going to get out of that? Are you really going to get, even if this family member that you care about were to listen to that and feel shocked, are you going to, what are you going to get out of it? And so I think, coming back to, and both of the question on that, and then also the previous question on enlightening people, checking in with, well, what am I afraid of? If the person that I want to be enlightened or be shocked or be jolted out of this thing, if they are or aren't, what am I afraid is going to happen if they aren't? Am I afraid we're not going to be as close? Am I afraid that I'm going to be on my own still? So I think checking in with that and seeing what is it I think I want out of this. And if it's connection, if it's that I want to be able to connect, I want to be able to feel closer, then you may not need to shock or jolt someone or to get more of that.
That may actually keep you from
Exactly.
what your ultimate goal is, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Because even if they get the information and even if they decide to step back, I don't know. I've seen this actually in my therapy room also, where I've had clients come in and say, my spouse shocked me out of this religion and I'm no longer going, but I can't forgive my spouse. It's been 2 years and I'm still angry and resentful that they forced this information on me. So it creates actually a lack of safety in the attachment, which can be really damaging to the relationship until it's sorted out and resolved.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah. I love the idea of information, getting information out there, being an information provider. I'm a little more uncomfortable myself being an information carrier, wanting to be the deliverer. Just because I find something happens in my mind as I'm thinking about that person and thinking it's not an agenda necessarily, but it feels like I'm judging some lack or something they could, and I feel uncomfortable being there. I just feel uncomfortable. I don't know their life. I don't know what the church is providing or giving to them in that moment that I feel so sure this piece of information is really going to be the best thing. So I love the idea of information. For me, I just, I stop at, and I also feel like it does something to the relationship by nature. And I do think sometimes we walk out of these structures like the church, but we keep the structure of like, I'm enlightened, I'm right, I know more, and therefore I should share it. I would like now for all of you to benefit from, this journey and it's natural to do that because it's painstaking, and it isn't, I do feel like it's an achievement to come into your own and to really, really do this thing for yourself and for people you love. But at the same time, I really love the humility and the seeing people and seeing, that people are on their own journeys and they are in different places. And what do we know in the end about what they really need or what's really working or what they're really, and that gentleness and that respect, I think is felt in relationships, and it allows relationships to thrive and that unconditional love to be in just rich soil.
Love that. Thank you, Jenny. That was great. I'll just add, some of you who followed Mormon Stories from the very beginning will know that I probably stopped Mormon Stories 3 different times between 2004 and 2009. And each time, a good chunk of that was me getting freaked out about the influence I was having. Because in my mind, I was like giving people truth and saving marriages and helping people get their lives back. And I think Mormon Stories, did that. But sometimes, I would notice that somebody who used to totally live the word of wisdom, for example, would start drinking or, using drugs, which, there are people who use alcohol and drugs in healthy ways, but I would sometimes see people get to an unhealthy place. Or I would see two people who were relatively happy in their marriage end up divorced after one of them or both of them left the church, or kids not do so well, or whatever. People who were relatively happy all of a sudden become overwhelmed and maybe even a little bit depressed. And I realized, man, I need to have humility, just like Margi's kind of saying. I need to have humility that people know themselves best and have their own journey. And yeah, the most I can do is just say, hey, if you ever want to talk about this, I'd love to talk to you. But to do anything more than that, you may regret what you push someone into if you're too forceful. So let it be something they drive. And that's what I like about the podcast model. You have to download it and click it and listen. And as long as I'm doing that, then if people choose it, they're choosing it. It's not something I'm forcing on them. Really, really quickly, I have to sort of speak up for Charles. We kind of gave Charles a bit of a hard time, but we left out the second part of his question. In addition to Charles talking about the Mormon goggles and people needing to take them off to see things objectively, Charles added that people removing their goggles is rarely a result of the proselytizing efforts of ex-Mormons. And so his point was, let people have their natural process. So Charles, I hope you feel like we corrected the record there. But then we had a couple people respond and say that for them, it wasn't a jolt. We were under this impression, we've been talking about this idea that it takes some jolt, and often a jolt is what leads someone to question the church. But Christopher says not always. His transition took years. He slowly evolved, mostly through his own musings. And there were other people as well who seconded that and said that for them, their faith journey was something that took a long time, that took multiple years. And that's something we need to keep in mind. So anyway, that's a little bit of clarification. Okay, Margi, why don't you read the next question? We need to go back to some of our listeners' emails. So which one do you want to read?
Should we go into boundaries?
Let's do it. Boundaries. Okay. This is a really good one. And this will be the last one we cover today. We need to end in about 10 minutes. So let's talk some boundaries.
So maybe what I'll do is I'll just read off a few questions, but it's all around, the subject is all around boundaries. How do you respond to a well-meaning outreach from a family or friend who is trying to save you? Okay. Or how to deal with parents, families, and siblings when they send you faith-promoting articles or book suggestions. And then the last one is, what do you do when people make sincere requests that you read, pray, and keep covenants? So thoughts on that, anyone?
Do you want to give your first thoughts on that? Or do you want to wait?
I'd rather put it out, actually.
Okay,
first,
all right. While our panelists are deciding if they want to unmute, Mindy writes, Margi, you have a beautiful soul.
Oh.
And Randy
nice.
Writes, I want to join the Church of Margi of Latter-day Dehlin. So thank you. I'm sure Margi loves that. I'm sure that's exactly what she's going for here. So Randy, send us, no, I'm just kidding. I won't say send us your money. That's not what Margi's going for. All right. So Royleane and then Jenny, what's your response to this question of boundaries?
Okay, just real quick. I think this is probably a really hard one for a lot of people. And once again, it's living in your own integrity. When I have great conversations with my father, and he's sent me some books and stuff like that, and I just tell him I really appreciate him, and sometimes I'll even look at him and read it and try and have a discussion with him, but try and let him know where I'm at. So I understand sometimes, especially if you're farther along in your faith journey, like this is not going to do any good, you sending me these things. And I once again, I think you just have to have that hard discussion with them where they know all you need from them is love and understanding and building a relationship. Let's quit with the ensign articles.
So you're saying sometimes just be graceful and accept it and thank them.
Understand their heart is coming from a place they love you, and in their mind it's, I love this person so much, I want to be with them in heaven. In my mind, of course we're going to be in heaven, right? It's all good, it's going to be okay, right? But their mind, they're thinking we're only going to be heaven if these certain things are lined up and these happen this way. So I always try to keep that in mind when I'm given something.
Love it. Thanks, Royleane. Jenny, what do you want to add?
Well, there are two different things that popped up. One is just the idea that we have permission to respond in multiple ways. So when we're talking about boundaries, boundaries can look like so many things, and it's going to really ultimately depend on what we want. And so, for example, somebody sends us something and we feel like maybe it's someone we feel kind of neutral about, or someone we don't want to put a lot of attention and time into developing a relationship or we just don't really feel any desire to respond. I mean, it really is okay to just not respond to someone. So that could be a boundary. And I think for a lot of us, we feel like we have to engage, and that's not necessarily true. So I think just knowing the boundary could be anything from we have a right to not respond, and they may or may not reach out again in some other way, to wow, I got this thing from someone and I'm noticing I want to engage, and what does that mean? And so I remember at one point I had a family member send me an ensign article or like a conference talk or something over the email. I think I've had that happen a couple of times, and both times I just tried to be really honest with myself. The first time I was like, okay, I'm going to get in, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to write down what I like about it, and I'm going to write down what I don't like about it. And that's what I did. I started to do that with the first couple of pages, and then I realized, this talk, if we have a conversation about this, it's just going to be a lot of stuff. And so I ended up, emailing back and saying, here's what I did. I got into the article and decided I'd be really honest with myself as I read it. I'd acknowledge what I liked. I would acknowledge what I don't like about it. And that's, what I started to do. And then, I realized I don't know if it'll be helpful for us to talk about this. What do you think? And she responded back and said, yeah, probably it won't be helpful then. And so I think, just being really honest with ourselves, and then again, being honest with others, and boundaries. There's no right or wrong. Boundaries are a container in which we're choosing to take risks. That's how I often think of boundaries. And so we get to determine what kind of a container we want to take risks within, and then get the information from that. And then the boundaries may be adjusted over time.
Love that. Boundaries are containers within which we choose to take risks. Jenny Marrow. Love it. Really quickly, Amy, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I love what Jenny said. That's great. And I resonate with this. This first question was actually from my husband, because all my family and all of his family are very active in the church, and we do get this all the time. And this may not work for everybody, but this has really worked for me, is just really expressing, thank you so much for sharing this. I always try to respond instead of ignore it. So I show them that I really appreciate that they've taken the time to send this to me. And I always try to find a little something that I relate to and that I know is going to go in line with their beliefs. And again, that's just worked for me. And because we do have very believing members on both sides. And so it may not work for everybody, but I found it to be very helpful with my family.
Love that, Amy. And tell Jeff thanks. We had an interesting comment, which was, and this is from Randy. He says the approach he likes to take is do one for one, which is I'll read this ensign article if you read the first 10 pages of the CES letter, and then we'll talk about it. Now, Ryan or Steve, you guys are both smiling. Why don't one or both of you unmute and tell us if you think that's wise, if it's not, if it depends. Ryan, you unmuted first. Steve, we're gonna expect you to have an answer too. But Ryan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably not
an article.
Yeah, I'm probably not the best example of how to deal with these situations myself. But
why is that? Why is that?
Because I tend to ignore most of the time. But I do think that it depends on who it's coming from and the frequency with which they're sending you material.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got people that it seems like almost on a weekly basis are sending me something, and these are people that would not be willing to do a 1-for-1. So I just ignore those. I don't know if that's the right thing to do or not, but
Well, there's good science behind ignoring being the most effective way to change behavior.
Mhm.
So that's
yeah, and well, it hasn't worked yet, but it hasn't. But yeah, because to me, it's kind of like one of those things where you have to like pick your battles, you know, and if you're going to try to like read an Ensign article or some apologist article and spend the time to offer some like thoughtful reply, ultimately it comes back to what we talked about before, where you can't convince anybody. So in the end, I mean, are you wasting your time or not? And I suppose, you know, to a certain extent, you're not wasting your time. But I don't know. I tend to fall on the side of ignoring. But I do think that that it is totally reasonable to do the whole 1-for-1 offer, because if they were to reject such an offer, then that tells you right there, you know, their mindset. I mean, if you're willing to read something and they're not, which happens, and has happened to me before, which may be one of the reasons why I just tend to ignore nowadays. So for me, it's kind of like, and maybe I'll be accused of being closed-minded or not. I'll accept that criticism, but to me, unless it's going to be presenting like a new piece of information or like a breakthrough sort of unexpressed position than before, then I'm really just not interested anymore in listening to it. If it's just going to be the whole same, you know, give Brother Joseph a break, or you know,
doubt your doubts.
let's try. Yeah, or maybe you just have the wrong. Maybe you're just not thinking about it in the right frame of mind, or whatever the variation on the apologetic article would be. I've gotten to the point where I'm just not interested anymore.
Right.
Mhm.
That's fair.
Mhm.
Steve, what do you want to add?
So I agree with most of what Ryan was saying. I think 1-for-1 does make sense in certain situations, and it really depends on who it is. And if they're really willing, if they want you to read something, and then you, in equal sincerity, were to say, I will if you'll read this. And then really what happens next is, I think, what'll be telling about the conversation. If it's about intellectual kinds of things and really kind of like being objective, that's great. If it goes emotional, if one's feeling shut off or hurt, or it goes into, this is affecting my faith, I can't read this further, or what have you, I think you should respect that. I think it's not going to be, they're not going to be open to reading the things that you're putting in front of them. But yeah, I think it makes sense. I think the onus is more on non-believers, frankly, on how these conversations go. We have all been believers to varying degrees. And so we understand that, the set of goggles, and it shouldn't be too hard to remember what the world looked like through those goggles.
Yeah.
Whereas it's really hard for them to look at the world through our eyes. For those who have eyes to see, I welcome them to open them and really take a look and really be here on this earth while we're here.
Yeah, love it. Beautiful. Beautiful. Charlotte writes, this is great, Charlotte. A family member was unable to discuss beliefs respectfully, crossed tons of boundaries, and was very hurtful. I had to set the boundary for now that I will not discuss the issue, and it is not okay with me for her to send me any religious materials. That isn't how I would prefer it, but I think it's what I need to do for now to preserve the relationship. Now, Margie, we talked about this last week. Mormons are so awful at boundaries sometimes. That seems like the most awful thing to do, is to say, stop sending me this, please. But talk about how that might not be the worst thing for the relationship, Margie.
Yeah, well, I have had to do that as well. So I feel you. And I do think a very boundary set with love, and also with intention and with an energy of sort of, I mean this, like, can be a beautiful thing, because what it does is it sort of protects this space where you can feel connection and empathy with the person. Whereas if you didn't set that up, the resentment would grow and the relationship would suffer. So I have done that as well. I was going to say there have been times that for me, when I speak up around this topic, is if I'm getting numerous, if I'm getting enough, and then I'm being called on it. So there's an expectation, and then I'm going to call you on it. I'm going to ask you about it in public or at a, and that is when I'm more apt to say, you know, thank you. I really appreciate you thinking of me in this way. And I know you love me. And I probably should just kind of tell you that I'm not looking at the ensign in the same way so much anymore. And I don't really, you know, I'm just not in the same place with it anymore. But I appreciate you sharing, you know, and I put it out there, and then I stick to it. And if they do it again and ask me again, I say the exact same thing, shorter version. I give them no more of me. It's like, yeah, I really don't look to those materials anymore to really read in my free time. Thanks for thinking of me, you know. And there's connection, there can be warmth, but there is a boundary where I'm being clear. I'm not really going to read it. This is where I am. And so I completely relate to that statement. And I do think it's important oftentimes to preserve a relationship and where it is to set up a loving and also really definitive boundary.
Yeah, it's sometimes the best way to preserve a relationship. It seems counterintuitive, but sometimes it's our best hope. Because otherwise we get so frustrated, we just shut them out.
We feel used. You start feeling like a doormat. You start feeling not seen. And all of those feelings just, they snowball fast.
So you either end up avoiding the relationship or blowing up and destroying the relationship. And neither one is going to be useful. So what's the best option? It's a good boundary. All right. It's time to be wrapping up. We're an hour and a half in. Man, I just want to say, well, first of all, panelists, I'm going to have each of you give your closing statement. If you want to plug something, I imagine each of you might have something to plug. So please prepare a brief closing argument with something to plug if you want. But while I'm giving you that, I want to just really thank Amy Grubbs. She makes all of this possible. She's fabulous. So Amy, thank you so much for all you do. You're fantastic.
Thanks.
I'll give you time for a closing statement. But I also want to thank Shandy Hill, who's not with us today, but she's moderating the comments. She helps us organize stuff. She's fabulous. So Shandy, shout out to you. I want to thank our listeners, because I love that we have people write in questions, but I really love this live dynamic of a conversation. And yesterday we did a Mormon Stories interview live, and we were talking about church statistics and sort of activity rates and the health of the church overall. And it was so beautiful to have listeners actually saying, well, this is what we're experiencing in Canada, and this is what it's like in Scotland, and this is what I experienced over in Bountiful. It made the conversation really rich. So I think I'm always going to want to favor the live comments, but I don't want to disincentivize people to email us or voicemail us. So we'll try and find a good mix. But I just want to thank our listeners for their comments. They made a really rich discussion today. So thank you. Those of you who are listening to the recorded episode, please do try and join us live if you can. If you can't, no problem. Email us your questions or thoughts. Other than that, I just want to say this has been really fun. And now we're going to go around the horn. So Amy, why don't we start with you? What's a closing statement or word of wisdom you want to share with us?
Great, thank you. Just as one little plug, because you said to plug something, if anybody wants to be on this panel, we want to bring in leaving members, people who have left. We love to have people from all sorts of the gamut, and I really like the panel that we found today and want to continue to have that diversity. And so please email us at mormontransitions.org if you're interested in that. And we would love to have you, because we'll have people on every single week. And just closing thoughts, I loved everybody's comments today. I think just kind of what I said last week is just really trying to find what works for you in your stage of life, and always be respectful and validating whoever you are talking to. And I think you'll always win out at the end of the day. So
Love that. Thanks, Amy. All right. Steve, what do you got for us?
So my plug, Amy just used the word gamut to describe the spectrum of Mormonism. So my plug is mormonspectrum.org. My good friend, Allison Udall, assembled a compendium that is unbelievable of resources on the web dealing with anywhere in the spectrum. We didn't focus a lot in Orthodoxy because, LDS.org pretty much handles that. But there's resources like books, websites, online groups, support groups, podcasts, blogs, the whole gamut. I'll use Amy's word again. Is found in Mormon Spectrum. The part of the spectrum that I'm mostly responsible for is in-person communities and a map of in-person communities. And so that's another plug is if you need community and you're anywhere in that spectrum kind of outside of, you may be still attending church, but you want to find people you can be authentic with and who can accept you. There are places like that near you. And if there isn't, you can create a group. The social web is just amazing. As far as my last comments for today, I think this is the crux of why we're human. We can communicate with each other using language. And our worlds in here, inside of ourselves, are very complicated. But we have to have a connection to the world out there. And so part of understanding how to communicate with other people who are just as complex as you is granting them a space in that sphere of their world in here. They may be scrunched up in the middle of it, fearful and tiny, or they may be pushing out against that sphere to the fullness of their creation, to use the term. And I think that's I wish that for any living human, any living being, is that they can live to the fullness of their existence. So, and communication is the path to do that with each other. So thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you, Steve. Thanks so much. It's been so great to have you on the show. Please come back and join us. All right, Royleane, we'd love to hear your parting thoughts. What do you got for us?
Okay, I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to come on and just to tell everybody, you be you. Everybody just do your journey the way that you feel that you need to do it, and to respect others to do theirs as well. And I wanted to read this little quote. The very least you can do in this life is hope for something, and the most you can do is live in that hope. And so all of us, I hope that we can live in our hope and in our integrity. As far as plugging something, oh my gosh, I just want to say thank you so much to you, John, for the Mormon Stories, for the podcast, for the online communities, so many online communities that helped me so much. When my husband first told me I needed somebody to talk to, I was very believing still. And I found this great website called Another Testament of Marriage. And that's on Facebook group. So if you're in a mixed faith marriage and you're believing and you need somebody to talk to, go there. Also, A Thoughtful Faith Online, Thoughtful Transitions. And of course, if you're in the Seattle area, come and join our group, Eastside Pilgrims Society. We'd love to have your voice.
Beautiful. Royleane, it was so nice to have you join us. Thanks for holding down the faithful believer perspective, even if progressive. That's great.
I tried, yeah, I'm progressive.
You were great. You were great. And we want to invite listeners to join us to be in that seat as well, because that keeps an important perspective. So Royleane, you were fabulous. Say hi to your husband for us.
Thanks, I will.
All right. Ryan, what do you got for us? Unmute. Sorry, Ryan. Yeah.
Okay, there. Sorry about that. I actually, just as you were saying that, I got a submission here from MormonLeaks, and it popped up on my phone.
Nice.
So,
it sounds like a
the
plug.
website is working, guys. The website is working. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to thank you guys too for the opportunity to be here. You know, with all the media that I've been doing over the last couple of months, it's actually kind of refreshing to be able to have a discussion like this about something that's not directly related to the website and what we're doing. Because not that I don't like talking about it, but it's nice to kind of have something, a little bit of variety there. But I'm going to give two really quick plugs. I'm going to give a plug for the believing members that may be watching this, and that would be to visit us at MormonLeaks.io, or visit our Facebook page or our Twitter, and follow what we're doing. And the plug is to them to not be afraid of information, because there is no reason why anything that we release through this project has to be inherently negative about the church. And information is power. So you should want to know these things, and don't be afraid of learning new things that might be uncomfortable. And if there is anything that ends up happening to be explosive or makes you super uncomfortable, that's not our fault. We're just simply putting the information out there. So that's my plug to the active believer, is don't be afraid of our website. My plug to the ex-Mormons that are watching this: if you're not already participating on Reddit in the ex-Mormon subreddit, I would encourage you to, especially in light of this conversation, because what we're talking about here today, about how to properly deal with your friends and loved ones and acquaintances when it comes to these topics, this is an almost daily topic that gets discussed there. And you can go to Reddit. If you Google Reddit ex-Mormon, you'll probably find it very easily. And you will read not only stories from people who are just like you that have gone through this, and they share the reaction that they got from their family and things like this. You can also, before you're ready to make a move, maybe you don't know how to approach a family member, or you don't know how to react to something they sent you, go to Reddit. It's fairly easy to maintain your anonymity. Give a little brief summary of what's going on, and believe me, the advice will flow, and it will be a wide spectrum of advice, and I think it will be helpful. And Reddit is one of those great places where you can just kind of go and speak freely, and for the most part be free of harsh judgments, and you can sort of cultivate your ideas and your feelings as you're transitioning through leaving the church. So those are my two plugs.
All right, Ryan, it's been great having you on. Really respect the work you're doing, and I think we're having you on Mormon Stories soon. Is that right?
Yeah, probably. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, Ryan, for joining us. It's been great. Come on again soon, and I want to meet your friend when I come to Vegas next. Is that all right?
Okay. All right.
All right, Jenny, you get the last word. What do you? Well, Margie gets the last word, but Jenny, you get the penultimate word. What do you got for us?
Oh, I was just, sitting here thinking it really was nice to be on the panel today. It felt fun to connect and converse with everyone here, and just think about listeners out there who are listening as well. And the thing that was popping up for me was, if I could say anything, it would be to really trust your passion and your compassion. Trust those parts of yourself. So trust your passion for connection, for truth, for honesty. Trust those things in yourself, and then also trust your ability to be compassionate to yourself and others, and really, practice living from that space, and let it unfold as it will. I think, one of the things that I have been working with in my own mind, because I tend to be a little bit right-brained in how I process, is the metaphor of, I've been thinking lately about raw milk, and it's something that I sometimes will go buy and use instead of store-bought milk, because I actually can't drink store-bought milk anymore due to lactose intolerance stuff. And one of the things that's interesting about raw milk is, because it maintains the good bacteria, it's more digestible for people. And so it's interesting how sometimes we sterilize things so much, thinking we want to make it safe, that it's almost hard to digest. And so I've been thinking about this in terms of my own relationships lately. Like, I tend to want so much safety that sometimes I over sterilize everything and try to predict what could happen and make it all perfect. And one of the things I've been trying to do is just relax into life. Let it be raw. Let it bring what's there. Trust your passion, your compassion. Feed yourself with things that are uplifting, that connect you to those things that matter in your life. And then, let things unfold and see what pops up. Sometimes strange and interesting things do, but it seems like that can be a helpful way to connect ourselves to life and to others.
Beautiful. Well, Jenny, it's been great having you on. If people want to seek out your services, what's the website again?
So if they want to seek out my services, you can find my phone number and email at www.jennymarrowhealing.com. And then you can also check out, I've got a few great free webinars on advancedrelationships.org. If you go under the romantic relationship and the business relationship tabs, there's a few fun webinars right now. And then Ask an Ex-Mormon Therapist podcast, check that out on iTunes, and feel free to write in a question if you want me to spend 30 to 60 minutes kind of diving deep into something. So
love it. Well, Jenny, you're delightful to have on, so thanks for coming, and please join us again.
Thank you. I would love to.
All right, Margi.
Are you giving comments too?
Maybe at the end, but
yeah. Okay. What would I say in closing? Loved all of the insights from you all, so thank you. What would I leave with? I would probably leave with the idea that relationships are sort of the working ground where we, I feel like, practice, right? Our values and our own sort of spirituality. And so within that, it's tricky and it's imperfect and at times it's messy. So I just wanted to say, with these difficult conversations, things will go wrong. They will. Things will blow up. Things will not be ideal. There is no, I think I said this last time, there is no way to package it up with a pretty ribbon. And that is just reality. But there's great news with that too, because it can also take the pressure off you somewhat, that there's an art to it, that there's a learning to it. So that would be definitely one of my final thoughts. And then maybe just to end with really what we're talking about in these conversations around such vulnerable topics is that really there's this opportunity to model unconditional love, this love that we're trying to move toward, to grow into, and to just be aware of that is an opportunity that you have, and to sort of emulate this idea that differences don't mean this cutoff from intimacy. They're not required. Being the same is not required. Differences can be something that allow for oxygen. They feed relationships. They make us accountable. They allow us to sort of grow and mature. And so to sort of, look at it as an opportunity to sort of practice embracing some of those qualities.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right.
What about you, babe?
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
I'll just echo what my sweet wife Margi just said. If you want to be listened to, then listen. And don't listen because you should expect that someday you'll be listened to. Listen because it's the right thing to do. And that's your best shot at being listened to. But most importantly, it's just the right thing to do. Don't try and force or push because you don't want to be forced or pushed. Be empathetic, partly because you want to model the empathy that you seek, but also because it's the right way to live and to develop and become a better human. So my summation is don't become the monster that you ran from, and instead be the person, model the love and the empathy and support that you're seeking. And, worst case, you'll become a better human. Best case, the person will open up and feel safe enough to then want to listen and understand your perspective, and they maybe even join you. And there's good to that, and there may be bad. So enjoy the ride no matter what.